Okay, this is part 2 of the combat mode, default mode, whatever you want to call it, configuration. Very, very complicated one. So we're going to have to jump into the animation blueprint for a little bit, and then we'll jump back into the character blueprint. So I might as well just go right into the animation. So to get there, just select your character, edit blueprint, open blueprint editor, click on your mesh. Go to the anim mesh right here. It'll take you down there, and you can double click on it, and then you're in. All right. Go to, let's start off in the anim graph, and you're going to go into your default state machine. And what we want to do, so when we come in to our default state machine, that's the entry point, we want to add a state and call it default mode. Okay, so right when we come in, we want to be in default mode. And it's going to have conditions from when it can go into your idle combat mode and when it can come out of your idle combat mode. And if you remember, if you double click on your idle run, we still have the old, this is the original, it came with the project. We still have this set up. So let's grab these right here, Control C. All right, and we're gonna put them in that idle. So this is what comes with the project. If you deleted it, it's just the third person idle run, and it's hooked up to speed. That's all. So in fact, you could Control exit. That way it cuts it, and then go into default mode and paste it in there. Okay. So now it's giving you up these warnings saying, hey, basically, you don't have your condition set up. So let's go ahead and set the conditions. So we want to go into default mode. So from idle mode if we're in combat. So if we're not in combat. So from idle to default mode, and it's not really idle. You should call it combat mode, but that's just what we've always had it. So I just leave it that way. So we're going to go into default mode. We'll get combat mode, and you'll be like, well, where the heck is it, Mark? You didn't put it there. That's right. Go to your anim graph, event graph, I'm sorry. And then click over here and say get combat mode. So it's just going to your character and it's pulling up that value that we set on the server. Promote that to a variable and call it combat mode. And one thing has me thinking in the back of my head, compile, save, go back to your character, so your character, and let's look at combat mode. I know something that just stuck out to me. It's not replicated, and it needs to be. So let's go ahead and do that now. So you got your combat mode selected, make it, I'm sorry, I just made it true. Don't do that. Go to your replication and say replicated, okay? And then if you look, you'll have the little balloons on it that say it's replicated. That could have been a big pain in the butt later on the road if we didn't catch that. So make sure combat mode is replicated. Compile, save all. Great. Back to your anim blueprint. And I'm sorry, guys, we're just going to be bumping back and forth. That's how these videos are going to be, these complex ones. Go into your anim graph, default state machine. And then, okay, back to where we were. So we're coming out of combat into default mode. So you would want to make sure that combat mode, get it, you want to make sure it's not true. So type in not boolean. So that's what that is. That's the condition. Compile and save. Now we want a condition for when we can go into combat. Well, that's easy. You just take your combat mode, get it, and plop it right into there. Compile, save all. Now I'm looking at my graph here. I have a few more connections that we could check, but let's just see what we have so far. Go into here. Let's press play. See if it's doing anything like it should whatsoever. I'm going to pick up the rifle. Press caps lock. Okay, that looks right. And then he's back into his normal running around. Good. Caps lock, he's in. Okay, now I'm curious if I'm in here. So it looks like there might be a slight, there's a slight hesitation if you're in your turning. If you're turning in place and then you go to, it's ever so slight. If you're in that mode, and we also have a jumping issue that we need to fix. As you can see, he's jumping and running in place. So let's see what we can go. Let's see what we can go ahead and do about fixing this on top of the laser and everything else. So let's go into our animal blueprint here. Let's back out of here and let's get to work, the grind. So we got this is our left turn loop. Let's go into, so there'll be a situation where we go into our non-combat mode. And that will be if combat is not. So get your combat and go not. Sorry, I can't type. I'm trying to look through a microphone and type. Not Boolean. Connect that right up there. I think it's going to be pretty much the same for the rifle turn right. Yep. Rifle turn right. If for whatever reason we're in that animation loop. And we transition, we want to make sure we can do that. And this is the hard part about animation mapping here, or whatever you want to call it, programming, whatever, is making sure you consider all the possible weird situations. And I'm going to show you a really weird one when it gets to the jumping one. It's messed up, man. There's no other way to say it. Okay, so going in is not so bad. So if we're in default mode, we basically need to do just what the regular combat mode is, and that is, are you in air? And that's a cool little function that Unreal made that basically checks if you're in the air. Are we in the air? Bam, that's it, man. Good to go. Now it gets a little hairy when we're transitioning to all the different modes, and I'll show you why here. Let's see, the third person jump, that one's not so bad, I don't think. I'm going to look on my notes real quick because I remember it was just a mother. And I can't remember why. We might come back to this one and see why. I have it set up so there's two different conditions on and they do different things at different times. So I'm just going to leave that one alone for right now. We'll continue on with the other stuff. We'll get to there. But it's a mess. We can at least jump into there for right now. So let's go to our third person character. Okay. So there are certain situations where we automatically want to go into our combat mode. First one is firing. So let's make a custom event and say fire to combat. Okay, and this one, it doesn't have to be replicated or anything like that. And fire to combat, it's going to come into play at about this point in our code. Okay, because you're not going to be able to fire anyway unless you've already picked up a weapon. So that's covered there. So we can skip all of this code here. Not that it's that much, but it's just one less thing to run. We want to be efficient. And then we want to do another custom event called from interact. This is going to be whenever you pick up a weapon, you're going to want to be able to transition into the combat mode, and you're going to plug in at right here. Now, the interesting thing about interact is like how I set it up before. When you picked up a weapon, you don't want to have to every time you pick up a weapon go right into combat mode, right? You want to make it so that the very first time you pick up a weapon, you're probably going to need to use it, right? You might be in a hurry and you want that weapon, so you pick it up. But if you've decided, you know what, I don't want to be in combat mode, you're out picking up various weapons, you don't want to automatically be going into combat mode every single time. That would be annoying. So we're going to drag off of here and do a cool node. It's called do once. Okay? And that will make it so it only happens the very first time. And then after that, this is useless. So every time your character, if it dies and respawns and has no weapons, the very first weapon you pick up, he's going to go straight into combat mode. which is handy. So now we don't have to replicate these or do anything special with them. So now that we have them, we're gonna have to go. We're gonna have to go back into where it is in the fire thing, which is right down here, and figure out where the heck we need to call it so that way it functions properly. So right after, let me see. So right on the fire event, right after we check if our spawned weapon is valid, we're gonna drag this right over here. We're gonna get our combat mode, get it, and we're gonna make a branch. Okay. So basically, it's checking, do you have your weapon? Yes. Are you in combat mode? Well, I'm in combat mode. Well, then don't worry about a freaking thing. You don't have to worry about it. But if you're not in combat mode and you're firing a weapon, what you want to do is you want to go drag off of here and say fire to combat. And this is going to take us right into combat mode, no problem. Now, the thing about this is if you were to just fire straight on right through here, he's going to shoot at the ground, which doesn't really do you any good. And if you're able to get a round off and somehow hit somebody, he might only have his gun partially way up, and it just gives the guy an unfair advantage, because here he was in like explore mode, and he's able to just immediately transition into combat mode, and it just kind of gives him an unfair advantage if he's able to literally look behind his back for you and then shoot you immediately. It's not really fair. So he needs to have a little penalty. Plus, we're going to put in a delay that gives a little bit of time for the animations to sync up and for him to get all the way into combat mode, and just a little bit of time. So we're going to drag off of here and say delay, and we're going to change it to 0.5. I know it doesn't sound like much, but it's an eternity when you got somebody shooting at you. So 0.5. So he's got just a little bit of delay. So let's compile, save all. So we've taken care of that. That's the combat mode one. Now we have the interact mode. So I am going to go and I'm going to look around for that. My notes. Okay. Drag off of here. Or don't drag off. I'm just talking out loud. Go to the interact right here. Okay, this is when we pick something up. So right after we set the weapon to our last index, so let's just, don't do that. Select all this. Drag it out over here. Bring over this over here. Okay, now we're going to do very similar to last time. We're going to check if we're in combat mode. So get combat mode. And then we're going to get a branch. And plug it in just like that. Bring this in. Okay. And just like last time, if we're already in combat mode, it doesn't freaking matter. Okay, it doesn't matter. But if we're not in combat mode, we want to drag off of here and say from interact to combat. And then we are just going to go straight in back to the spawn weapon to server, which is what happens right after you pick something up. So compile, save, and then so let's follow some of this logic through. So you press the interact button, it does something over here, your weapon pickup macro, sets your weapon to your last index, checks if you're in combat mode. If you already are, doesn't worry about it, but if you're not, it hits this from interact to combat. Let's double click and see what happens. It jumps all the way over here. It's going to do this once. It's going to put you into combat mode. It only does it once. Now if you fire the weapon, it's going to check if you even have one. If you're in combat mode, it doesn't care. If you're not in combat mode, it's going to say, okay, we're going to fire to combat, and then we're going to so it's kind of screwy how this works. It's immediately going to go into fire to combat, so it immediately starts getting you into combat mode. And while that's happening, this delay timer is running, and then that fires as soon as that 0.5 seconds expires. So let's test some of this. I'm not 100% confident and when we start getting into these many factors. So let's give it a shot. So I pick up the weapon. Bam! He goes into combat mode. Fantastic. And let's see. I fire the weapon. Oh, beautiful. Something finally works. Now, here's the real deal. We were the server. Run a dedicated session. Watch everything burn down. Okay, so he's walking around. He picks up the weapon. Boom, he goes right into combat mode. I love it. Let's say he's walking around and he fires. Boom, it's great. Go out of combat mode. He's facing the wall. Let's see if he can shoot the wall. Boom, perfect. He's out of combat mode, blah, blah, blah. So, and then let's say, okay, I'm out. There's no more bad guys. I'm walking around. I'm collecting stuff. Okay, I'm collecting this gun. I'm collecting guns. I'm not in combat mode. That's what we want, right? Because we only want it to do it once. We only want it to do it the very first time we go to pick something up. Then it's going to go into combat mode. Just like that. And if we caps lock and go out of combat mode, we can pick up our more weapons and do whatever. But shooting will always go right into combat mode. Always. Okay. Now, as you can see, we got some weird laser lights turning on at weird times. So we're going to need to go ahead and fix all that garbage. And that's a whole nother thing. So let's get on to that. And I'm going to have to look to my notes to figure that out. So I made a I made a whiteboard for this. It's a whole board. It's huge. And it tells me all the little places that this thing could go wrong. So first off, in the character, we already did the fire, interact, and tick functions. We did the fire, interact. We need to go look at the tick function. Okay, so in there, our event tick, we got something we got to set. All right. So right after, let's see, calculate speed. Okay. So I switched these around because no matter what, we're always going to need to know our speed, regardless if it's locally controlled or not. So we're going to run in the event tick. It's always going to be calculating the speed. We're going to need that. But we're still going to put our locally controlled right here because we don't need them running all this other stuff. We don't need all the other people running it. So we'll just switch those around. Then we're going to get our combat mode and we're going to check. So press B for branch, left click, and it's going to pop up. Okay. So first thing it's going to do is it's true. If you're in combat mode, great. Continue on, business as normal. Run all these other functions on the tick. That's great. But if we're not in combat mode, I'm just double checking. If we're not in combat mode, there's no reason we need to be processing all of this other stuff. So that saves us a lot of time. However, or not time, but processing power. However, the problem is while it does save us time, it also isn't having our crosshair and lasers sync up and check whether they need to be on or off. So sometimes they can get stuck either on or off. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into the weapon and we're going to tell it what to do based off of being in combat mode or not. So go to your third person example, go to your third person blueprints, go to weapon actual master, and over here we're going to need to change some things. So let's drag these right over here. Let's drag them off like this. Okay, we'll make a branch right here. Move these over just a little bit. Okay, and we're gonna come off of here and say, are you in combat mode? Let's see, just combat mode. Get combat mode. Okay. If you are in combat mode, business is normal. Okay? Keep doing everything how you've been doing it. Do the lasers when you should. Everything's great. If you're not in combat mode, shut it down. Boom. Like this. That way it'll set its visibility to hidden. Okay? It'll set that up, and then you don't have to worry about it trying to calculate everything. Is it going to fire at the right time? Because there are certain circumstances where it may not fire. And if you remember the laser sight mesh, it propagates to the children. And if you look over here, the laser sight mesh also contains the point light. So as soon as you make that go false, then it totally turns everything off and you're good to go. So let's test this out and see where we're at. Okay, so let's see. Let's get the laser light kind of going and then turn it off. It shouldn't be going. And there were certain circumstances where you could get the light to pop on and then it would go. But it looks like things are starting to come together. Laser is not randomly popping on when it shouldn't be so far. Okay, well, that part looks good. Let me check my whiteboard real quick. So it looks like, according to this, we just got to work on ironing out some of our animations, and then we should be good. So we're going to save that for part 3 of this mini series, and then everything will be good. So I'll see you guys on the next one.